Hello and welcome to the High School Huddle. It is Wednesday, December 6th, 2023, the final week of high school football. 5 state championships in the books. 6 state championships in the books. 3 more to play this week, beginning on Friday with the Class B title. 2 state championships on Saturday at UCO Chad Richardson Stadium. 1 o'clock and 7 o'clock is the A in Class 2A state championships, and we are done with football after that. Welcome in High School Huddle along with Ronnie Phillips, Dr. Mike Simpson, Phil Nichols, I'm Chris Evans. We will talk a lot of high school football. We'll have highlights of the state championship games coming up here in a little bit. We'll have some game analysis as well. We'll also take a look at the 3 title games this week as well. Should be a fun week of football. And but first, we are going to bring in Dr. Mike Simpson, who is the Superintendent of Guthrie Public Schools, also a member of the OSSAA Board of Directors. And today was a busy day for the OSSAA as they announced with a 12-1 vote. The directors approved an exception that, the board voted to allow one transfer. And there's a bunch of things to get into here with that. Pretty much it allows one transfer for any high school student who has established athletic eligibility at an initial school. And now they will not have, right now if they did that, they would have to sit out a year or move into the district. All this begins July 1, 2024, so this is not affecting into this athletic season for the winter sports now underway in the spring sports, of course. And the board also voted to establish a July 15th as the deadline for free transfers leading up to each school year. Afterwards, a hardship waiver would be required, as it is now for the upcoming school year. And one more note here. Additionally, if the OSSS finds that a student has been recruited to a school, that student will be deemed ineligible to participate at any level of the athletic season. So with that, Dr. Mike Simpson, this is something that has been not bubbling up just the last couple of days. This has been talked about before at board meetings, and surveys have gone out to member schools.
We've had a lot of discussion about this over the past really 18 months or maybe 24 months even as internally as a board. But one of the things that was a catalyst for this is when the state legislature passed open transfer for students with across the state. And so now every school district has to establish a capacity for their for each grade and to accept the transfers. And if they are over that capacity, they can't accept a transfer. And it's set by the board, and it's reviewed quarterly. In fact, I just reviewed our board agenda for next week, and that's on our agenda for the December board meeting.
So that might, for one school, might be 50 students, and for another school might be 700 students per class.
It's depending on the school district and what they could, because obviously we're not going to have the same capacities as an Edmond Santa Fe or an Edmond North or a Mustang, because we're a smaller district and our buildings are smaller and things like that. So that was kind of the catalyst to this whole thing, to get it when the legislature passed that, they did not include athletics with that. And so there was kind of a misunderstanding among a lot of folks that they thought, well, if I'm a legal student in this district, I should be able to compete.
Right.
Well, that's not really the case. But kind of going back to a little bit of history of some of this stuff. It's been, and I had the conversation at the board meeting today. Those of us that have been in this business for as long as I have, and a few of the people on that board, we can remember when you actually had to establish residency in the 7th grade in order to, and then if you moved, even in junior high, you had to get a hardship. If you transferred, you had to get a hardship or sit out a year.
Now it's the 9th grade.
Now it's the 9th grade. And so we've had, we've I don't know that I'd call it retreated a little bit, but maybe we have, on some of our hardline stances on what we're allowing. And so we did that, I don't know, it's probably 8, no, it was longer than, because it's I've been on the board for 10 years now, and it was before that, so probably 12, 15 years ago, we did that. Part of it was the volume of hardships, and as families have become more mobile, and you know, people are not, even back 15 years ago, people were not as place-bound on where they might work and where their family might live. And so kids might go to school somewhere that's not where they live as far as the school district because of where the family works or something like that. So that started this move, and the volume of hardships that the staff at the OSSAA was having to process was absolutely astronomical. And so that cut down on a lot of them. And then when the open transfer was passed this last year, and you know, let's be honest, we've got a lot of other external influences as well. When you look at what's happened on the college athletic landscape,
Yep.
You know, it's and I'm old school. You guys know that. I struggle with all of this, but you know, it's the times they are changing, and so rewind to a couple of years ago, where or a couple of summers ago, where I'm actually testifying, and Chris, you were there at an interim study about questioning the process of how we approved hardship appeals for students that did not relocate into the district where they wanted to be eligible. And along those lines, you know, we have a process, and it has proven effective. And I think it is about as impartial as you can make it. I don't think you can ever say that it's 100% impartial, but I think it's a good process. But it's hard to understand each of those cases. And having been, I'm in year 10 of that board, I've heard, gosh, there's no telling how many hardship appeals I've heard. Six today.
Six just today.
Where we may read, I'll read one of those hardships may have a 60-page packet on it of documentation. Some of them may have 15 to 20. But, you know, they'll vary. There's some that are over 100. Well, you read all of that, and you learn that every one of these is different. Every story is different. And so, you know, on the outside looking in, you look at one and you go, well, that passed. I don't understand how that passed, and how did this one get denied? Yeah. But there's always a story there. And so taking this along with where we are as a state politically and trying to meld all this in was a key part of what we were considering as a board. Is we wanted to be proactive and put ourselves in a position where we're not told by the legislature, you're going to do it this way, and if it's screwed up in a year or two, we'll come back and we'll fix it. Because a lot of things that happen at the state capitol, especially it seems like in education, it seems like it's a lot of times that way. They won't ask what they think should happen, but instead they'll put in what they think should happen without ever considering many circumstances that they wouldn't be aware of.
And from what I've learned over the years with legislation, you know, there's a school or district or somebody upset, and so they go to their state legislature in that area of their world, and that legislature understands their world, and where they might not know the other parts of it, and just kind of go what they feel for their home base, not knowing that the OSSAA has to make a decision statewide. Yeah,
and that's how the unintended consequences are hard to fathom, but are always present when you do things, and that's where we wanted to try and be out ahead of this, so that we're working with the membership, and we took this out to all of the. Every school is invited to an in-person or a Zoom meeting with of other administrators, where the leadership of the OSSAA meet with them, and they have a dialogue. It's not a monologue; it's a dialogue where they seek opinions and try to get input. And then we do multiple surveys and things along those lines. But being able to communicate some of the political realities, because in some parts of the state, in some pockets, people may not be as in tune to what is truly going on in the Capitol. And I think we've seen that with a couple of key things from the last legislative session. The first thing is obviously the open transfer. And the next thing is the tax credits. Those of us that are in the school business, we still call them vouchers, but the tax credits for students that attend private school. And those things were hot topics, and something that probably had something to do with some of the catalysts for some of the action that we took today.
So kind of put it into perspective, if a student is attending Montana high school and their sophomore year and they want to go to New Hampshire high school, they can just go, if the school accepts them, they can just start playing. As long as they keep it before that July 15th deadline, they can automatically play. They don't have to move in there, automatically play.
And that's if that's their first move.
If that's first
after
move.
their ninth grade year.
Okay.
When you establish eligibility for your ninth grade year, and wherever you are there, that's where you're, regardless of where you live, that's where you are. So if we have a kid that lives, let's say in Perkins, that gets a transfer into Stillwater as a ninth grader, their eligibility is tied to Stillwater, not Perkins.
And you can go, elaborate as living in Perkins and attend Woodward High School. Obviously, drive. That's
sure.
Just to make it a little bit more easier. It's not neighboring schools, but you can live in Perkins and go to Woodward.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Altus and go to Union.
Yes.
Yeah. If you had a plane, I guess.
Right.
And it's also, let's confirm this as well, because I'm sure people will ask. So Johnny's a real good football player, and he wants to play for the best team in the state, Bixby, but he wants to play baseball at another school. He cannot move and he cannot transfer after football season to baseball and be eligible right away. Correct? He'd actually have to move in or do the hardship.
Yeah,
July.
And that's why we tried to vet this. We also try to consider. There's a whole lot. We all know now. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes on in the summertime.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we, if a coach has worked really hard to help a student athlete in the summertime, and then, then they move. Let's say if we put the date at August 1st, they work all summer with one team. They realize, I don't know that I'm going to play because the guys around me are really pretty good. Yeah. So we tried to find a happy medium there. We looked at surrounding states. Arkansas has a July 15th.
So they have an open transfer. Arkansas does.
Yes, they do.
So Oklahoma's not in the wheel on this.
Yeah, and that's ours is very similar to Arkansas.
Okay.
On that.
Dr. Simpson, I got a question. Chris pointed out, and I see that I'm still in your notes here, but talks about that if it's deemed that there was recruiting going on, that the student athlete will not be eligible to participate at any level. What are the possible consequences if it's found that coaches were recruiting? What are the checks and balances for those coaches?
Historically, that's been, let's be honest, that's been hard to prove when we've had some things like that. But the school that they are employed by would be placed on some type of probation.
Okay.
And that would be obviously come through an investigation and some opportunities to appeal to the board and things along those lines.
Right.
Norman North football coach Justin Jones, who's also the president or whatever is the Oklahoma Football Association, told one of the writers, this could potentially change the landscape of high school athletics. I'm interested to see how districts throughout our state change or if policies are amended to accept transfers. There will certainly be a new normal. Yes. Do you see this bringing in possibly more transfers? Say there's 85 a year. Are we looking at possibly 145 now?
Hard to say right now, Chris. The thing that I've looked at Guthrie and what we do because we're busting at the seams.
Right.
We were very intentional about when we set our limits of working with the board about just our practical capacities across the district. But we also, districts that are growing like we are and some of the suburban districts around us, We don't know who's walking in the door on August 15th.
Yeah.
And so I kind of made the call of we will not accept new transfers until after the 10-day drop, which generally is around Labor Day, because I want to use the numbers that we have because after the 10-day drop, once you start school, then you know who your go students are. In other words, the students that registered, that they enrolled, and they never showed up. Yeah. The ones that moved in over the summer and enrolled right before you started school. I wanted to make sure that the kids that live inside our district boundaries have the first opportunity for a desk in our school district. This kind of throws that out the window a little bit. Yeah. And so we'll go back and meet with our leadership team to try and rethink some of this. But the other part of this is that the open transfer law created is once you are in, unless you have chronic absenteeism or a discipline issue, you're in. Yeah. So once you're in, you're in. And that's on the transfer side of things. That's not really eligibility, but that helps stabilize what our capacities are. And I don't know, this has all been kind of a learning experience this year with the open transfer. And we didn't even have the variable of athletic eligibility.
Right. The one of the first things I thought, and there's a lot of
Bless
people,
your hearts.
a lot of people throwing different scenarios out there, but honestly, the first one that came to mind, Oklahoma City Public Schools and Tulsa Public Schools, the two largest school districts. I mean, there's some great athletes out there. Now it's going to be a little easier for them. And back in that interim study, it was the discussion of rich families had the ability to get up and move. Where now, families who can't just get up and move, then with this transfer deal, now they'd be able to do what interim studies say the rich families can do.
Yeah. Well, and it's kind of always been the notion, even back before we opened it up for the freshmen. One of the challenges, and this is long before I was on the board, one of the challenges with the OSSAA has been it's either the rich or the transient.
Right.
Okay.
Because the rich could have a second home. And we had many situations way back when I first was in coaching and before I was even an athletic director where families would just go buy another home. And so they had dual residency, and then the OSSAA passed a rule policy, part of the Constitution, I'm not sure which it is, where you couldn't do that. And then, of course, when if your family is somewhat transient, in other words, you rent and you can pick up and move pretty easily, then you can go find a place if it's available and you can afford the rent. You can go find a place pretty easily wherever you want your kids to go to school. If it's and that can be for benefit of academics or it can be for benefit of athletics. Yeah.
Did you guys discuss a lot of the loop? When any type of law or rule or something, there's always people out there trying to find the loopholes.
What are our unintended consequences?
Yes. What are the unintended consequences?
We're going to figure some of those out.
Yeah.
Probably.
Yeah.
The staff is still. They're going to get together. And trying to hone up some of this and some of the fine print that we can approve as a board. The way we did this as a board policy, not as a matter of the Constitution, so that the board can make changes to this.
That's good.
As opposed to, it's cumbersome, but for appropriate reason to change the constitution of the organization, and it requires a vote of the membership, and sometimes that can be time consuming and challenging. This can be done with board action if need be, and that was something that we were intentional about doing to make. It's more of a shift on the fly if we determine that needs to be something done.
David, Go ahead.
Go ahead. All I was going to say is one thing I do know is just a parent of past athletes in the state of Oklahoma. And then we've had a privilege of getting to know a lot of the people at the OSSAA with our work in broadcasting. I do know this, and I told you this a few weeks ago. I don't think the OSSAA has ever been in better shape than it is right now from a leadership perspective, a staff perspective. You know, I think that begins at the top and goes all the way down. I trust the people that are there, and I think that's the thing. Your guys' hand, at least from me, my perspective, it's just me talking, it was really forced, you know, and you've got to do some things to, like you said, to get out ahead of it and to make sure that we have control, to make sure that professionals know what's best. You know, and that's the thing that always concerns me is, you know, there is a time in everything where you got to defer to the people that know. And so that's where I find myself on this.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to read here. Executive Director David Jackson said, we do feel like this is something going to be done whether we like it or not. The message is clear out of this office. We're not promoting free transfers. That's not what we're doing. We're trying to be proactive and come up with something that we feel is inevitable. I cannot say that word. Inevitable. Sorry, thank you. No. To control the narrative, so to speak. If we don't, who knows what will be given to us from legislation.
Yeah.
And
I've got to really give David Jackson credit on this too, because you know, he and I have had a lot of discussion about this through the last 24 months. We talk a lot one-on-one about this sort of stuff, and he called me and said, you know, Doc, you got a minute? And I go, yeah, I got a minute.
These are big decisions.
Are you?
But when he floated it out there and said, he said, I think it's time. And I said, David, I would agree. And it was, you know, I'm old school enough that I'd like to go back to some of the rules that were in 1992. But
good year, 92.
Yeah,
good year.
Yeah, but that's not where we are.
Yeah.
And so then we have to decide: do we want to craft how this looks, or do we want to be told how this looks with no way to plan for the unintended consequences that we talked about?
Yeah, you know, you always hear about the worst case scenarios where a school hires an AAU basketball coach, and then their AAU basketball team that they play in the summertime are now transferring into this particular school, and now they have their AAU team playing high school basketball. Yeah.
Well, you know, listen,
see that now. Yeah.
The tough thing is going to be, and we were talking about this off the air, but just us. But poor Doc got here. But you know, how do you regulate that? I mean, it's like herding cats. I mean, and listen, the mass majority, the super mass majority are going to do it the right way. We all know that. It's like anything else in life. The only time you ever hear about something not doing it, it's the exception to the rule. And inevitably, unfortunately, I think for my friends at the OSSAA, they're going to have to deal with some of those moments, and they know that. But you know, we got to trust in the group that's leading us through this. I know I do, and you know, you guys will do the best you can with it. Have they talked to you about re-upping for another 10 years on the board?
Well, here's the thing. You know, I back when the state legislature talked about term limits, I supported them. I don't think it's a great idea for the state legislature, but I'm very thankful that it's in place for the OSSAA board, because you know, the
selective term limits is great.
The idea, you know, I mean, I love that organization. Yeah. It's been a great run, but you know, and maybe it was because I was president of the board during COVID. I don't know.
Yeah.
It seemed like the toughest things, but I do completely agree. The things that in those 10 years that I've been on there, you know, it's like I tell everybody that works for Guthrie Public Schools, all of our jobs are temporary.
Yep.
And Guthrie's going to be handing out diplomas long after we're gone.
Yep.
But it's what we make of it while we're there.
Yep. And
that's kind of how I've approached the OSSAA on that. And you know, I've I have 5 more board meetings. And the fact that I know that.
Not counting.
But I'll say this, and it's no secret. You know, we're all friends here, and I really respect what you've done in Guthrie Public Schools. And I would multiply that even more so with the OSSAA, because there's so much stuff that's out of your control. But as a board member, specifically the COVID year, I remember that press conference. I saw a picture from that day to day that popped up from a file photo. And I remember Chris and I were down there setting up to get ready to start the state basketball tournament. Just finished setting up, and the guy gets off the phone and says, "Tear down, boys, we're canceled."
Press conference.
You're right. And so we load and fly down to the press conference. And I remember sitting there going, holy criminy, what a year to be in charge of the OSSAA.
That was just kind of it was surreal.
Yeah,
it really was.
You've done a great job. You've represented our community well on that board, and you've done a lot of good work for the kids all over the state. So I just want to say that publicly. I appreciate what you've done.
You know, and that when when it's difficult, and when we're getting beat up publicly and things like that, you know, you guys know I love to go to the state championship games, because when I look out there and watch those kids celebrate at the end,
that's what it's all about.
I know that what we're doing matters and makes a difference in their lives.
Yep.
And you know, so as corny as that sounds, that's really what I believe.
That's why you're in education, Doc.
Yeah, and that's the cherry on the top of that whole thing. Yeah. I mean, going down there and watching those guys get their medals in the football championships this last week and get that trophy, and the kids that on the runner-up team that are in tears because of all that they poured into this. Mm-hmm. And it didn't quite happen, but all of the things that they've learned through that competition and through that hard work and the work ethic and things like that, that's what makes it worthwhile.
Yeah. And I think you pointed out, the kids get their medals. The first year that we've given awarded individual medals to each participant
in football.
Mm-hmm. And I love it. I think that was a great decision. Of course, there's always logistics, but I think the staff's handled it so well. Yeah. It's been a non-issue. I mean, they've done a great job with it. But I would just, as a fan, I was glad to see that. I think that's awesome. We're able to do that for the football kids.
Yeah. Well, and medals will be handed out at Hall of Fame Stadium for the next 3.5 years.
Yeah.
That was another decision.
Yeah, we got that done.
Good.
It's good.
Yeah, and
that's awesome.
And I told one of the other board members today. I said, it's good that we moved away for a year, because then
realize what you have.
You place a value on that. Plus, I think it was good. I think I know our kids that played at OU in the finals. What an atmosphere!
Yeah.
What an atmosphere that they'll remember forever. And I've heard so much about the Perry State Championship in Stillwater, and the atmosphere that was there. They'll never forget that. No. And then we can go back and play in the best softball facility in the nation, probably in the world, because it's right in our backyard.
Yeah, and I think Hall of Fame Stadium USA softball not only heard from the OSSAA players and coaches, but parents and fans as well.
Sure.
It needs to be there.
Yeah. I mean, the notion that we would have such a facility sitting empty on the weekend that we're determining our state champions. That's why I'm proud of him. And David Jackson handled that one himself personally as well. I mean, he's the one that got that, got everyone to the table and brokered that deal.
He's a good leader.
Yes, absolutely.
We appreciate you stopping by. I'm not going to try to keep you more than 30 minutes. We're on 30 minutes. It's been a long day. Dinner's been ordered or cooked. I'm not sure which one
which
yet.
one it is?
I'm not sure.
I'm not sure yet.
I heard you got extra skillets at the house to do those in now. So
oh, boy.
But we appreciate you stopping by and talking on a pretty big day for the association, for the sports of Oklahoma.
Doc, thank you.
Appreciate all you guys do for kids, too.
Appreciate
it. Doc.
Dr. Mike Simpson. We'll take a time out and come back and take a look at the state championship games that were played last week. We got highlights, stats, and analysis, all that great stuff. Coming up here on the High School Huddle, we are presented by Generations Church.